everyone. Whew. Happy Saturday. We got a lot to talk about. It is going to be quite a week here in the Carolinas, quite a week and a half. I know there has been a lot of talk on, social media. We're getting questions from viewers, not just about this weekend's weather, of course, looking ahead to next week, Christmas weekend, the big 4-letter S word that, wouldn't get me in trouble at work. Of course, snow. We're going to get to all of it. We're going to kind of go in order. Something I normally don't do before these streams is make notes just to make sure I've covered everything, because normally we are just talking, right? We meteorologists don't use a prompter, so we're just kind of chit-chatting from our brains, but I just want to make sure I cover everything. So if you see me referencing my notes at all, that's kind of why, just making sure we're covering all. First things first, I just hope everyone has a happy and safe weekend this weekend. We do have some clouds around now, which you can kind of see from our 4-box live cameras from Dallas, Kannapolis, and Monroe. I have a lot of loyal followers who are, I would say, mad at me is probably the best way to describe it, because it's cloudy again. I promise it's not going to be cloudy the entirety of the day. The reason why we have clouds right now is a cold front's moving through the Carolinas. This is going to bring us a reinforcing shot of colder air by tomorrow and into Sunday, but the sun will come back out this afternoon. So as you look at our Kannapolis, Dallas, Monroe cams, I know it's cloudy now. We have clouds returning. Also, I should have mentioned this at the top of this. Apologies in advance, folks, but this is probably going to be a longer stream than normal. So I hope you stay tuned, because we are going to kind of break down all of those chances for snow, what I'm watching, what contradicts itself, things like that. But first, of course, we got to talk about this weekend's forecast again. So clouds now, we can see some of those clouds streaming in here from the south and west. If my graphics want to advance, magic, magic, magic. Well, they go at some point. Let's see. Let's try a different clicker. Sorry, folks. This is what you always hope doesn't happen, right, on TV. I'm actually going to head over there for a second. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Is it me or is it the graphics? Okay, we should be good to go. So satellite and radar, you can kind of see things streaming in here from the south and west. There we go. Now we're cooking with gas. So clouds for the rest of this afternoon. Again, you're going to see some of them this morning, early afternoon. But notice by the second half of the day, most of these should start to clear out. So overnight will be cloud free. Now, because of the lack of cloud cover tonight, our temperatures are going to get even warmer. It's what's called radiational cooling. So what happens is that as the wind starts to settle and we have clear skies, that allows for cold air to kind of settle closer to the ground. And as that happens, we're allowed to get even colder than normal. So interesting little phenomenon there, but it's called radiational cooling. That's kind of what we have tonight. The one thing I want folks, especially at the highest elevations of the mountains, to be aware of tonight, as that there is a small chance for a few snow flurries, especially at those highest elevations. So keep that in mind. But across the Piedmont, that is not going to be a risk. In fact, 36 was the low this morning, 51 this afternoon, with, of course, those few clouds, but overall partly sunny this afternoon. But tomorrow, a lot colder with more sunshine. Now, I didn't include this in the stream, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow. But folks, if you are trying to plan out maybe your outfit, kind of how you're going to get to Bank of America Stadium tomorrow, make sure you're keeping in mind where your seats are. If you are on the visitor side, oftentimes you're in the sunshine for most of the game. Of course, if you are that you have really great seats maybe that are kind of under the little shaded spots that are maybe a little bit closer to the 50-yard line, things like that, you're going to be colder, right? Because you won't have the sun. And of course, the wind can create those little wind tunnels, which makes it feel a little bit colder. But for the mountains tonight, again, a few snow flurries, definitely a possibility. This will mainly be after, I would say, midnight and before about 9 a.m. This is at the highest elevations. I mean, all of the high elevations, I would say mostly about 2,500 feet and above, closer to the Tennessee border. And you can see it's not much, but it's kind of just a sign of what could be coming later on this week. So I at least wanted to mention it here before we wrap up the weekend, that it is at least a possibility. And we'll be tracking, of course, those live pictures tomorrow morning on Wake Up Charlotte starting at 6 a.m. So tonight, that isolated chance, we're dry Sunday night, Monday night, and Tuesday night. And then there actually is a chance for some snow in the mountains Wednesday night. This will not be a threat for the Piedmont. It'll be only centered across the mountains with a few snow showers there. And then even a little bit of a wintry mix possible for the foothills. It's something, again, this is Wednesday night into Thursday. It's still multiple days away, but I'm at least watching it. So I want to let everybody know. But what is expected to happen with kind of that Wednesday all the way through Friday event is that what will happen is if we get a few flurries in the mountains, we could have a little bit of a mix near the foothills. As temperatures warm throughout the day on Thursday, anything that's moisture outside of the mountain peaks will melt and just be straight rain. So Wednesday into Thursday, those rain chances, no matter where you are, by Thursday, anything that falls outside of the mountain peaks will be rain. And it will be a cold rain because high temperatures Thursday will only reach the upper 40s and lower 50s. So, kind of a similar setup to what we had earlier this week, where it was cloudy and rainy and just kind of cold off and on all day. But then we get closer to Thursday night and into Friday. And I think this is kind of question mark number one. We know the cold air is going to be in place, right? Look at these lows or these high temperatures, excuse me. 50 degrees around that on Thursday, and then we drop to 37 degrees for a high temperature on Friday. I kind of want everyone to keep this in mind that we know for a fact that next week, late in the week and into Christmas weekend, is going to be colder than normal. Last year, we had highs in the 70s. It was 20 degrees warmer than normal. This year, 20 degrees colder than normal. So regardless of what happens with that potential for some wintry precipitation, I just want everyone to be prepared for how cold it's going to be. With highs in the 30s, there's the potential for lows in the teens. So it's going to be a pretty big deal. Now, what you oftentimes need to see snow here in the Southeast, this is pretty similar for whether you're talking about the North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, things like that. But you need cold air locked in place. And we have a really strong high that's kind of going to be north of our trough, kind of up into Canada. And that's going to lock that cold air in place and kind of create a blocking pattern, which is why we're not only cold, but we're cold for a longer period of time. This, I would give it a check mark. We are going to be cold. Again, that's not a question. The question is, will we have the cold air at the same time as the moisture? And will that moisture source be cold enough or too warm that it kind of overrides the cold? You need everything to be in place at the same time, right? You need all the ingredients. And again, we know we have the cold. We know we have the Arctic blast. You can see that, of course, as we head toward late next week. Another question mark, other than the cold air locked in place, which we know we have, and the moisture that's not too warm but not too cold either, is where the polar jet stream exactly sets up. Now, I don't have the ability to kind of draw on the maps like oftentimes Brad can in kind of the vlogs, but bear with me. You see where the polar jet stream is set up across the deep south. If that polar jet is further south, kind of all the way down towards southern Florida and even further south than what it's showing up on this map, oftentimes what can happen is our air is drier than it is where the polar jet stream sets up. Now, oftentimes you'll hear the term, oh, it's too dry or too cold to snow. That's not necessarily the case. There's a little bit of a background to that term. What it means is that if the polar jet stream is too far south, that means, for example, let's use this map, that maybe the state of Florida and southern Georgia, that's where the polar jet stream is set. That means that they're kind of seeing those storm tracks because the jet stream is what drives these storm tracks. And there's just no moisture for us to work with. I don't necessarily think that'll be the case this time. I think we'll have some moisture to work with. It'll be where that moisture is. And again, if it's too warm to actually let us see a straight snowfall event, because I do think we are going to see moisture 2 times really over the next few weeks, at least in the Charlotte area. Thursday night and into Friday, and then again Sunday night and into Monday. So what we watch at this point, these are Brad's winter weather forecasting rules, is once you're at 7 to 10 days out, you're looking for a pattern recognition. So a favorable pattern for some kind of winter weather in the Southeast or in the Mid-South, in the Carolinas. You can say and use any of those terms. What happens is when we're weeks out from an event, model data goes crazy. Most models run every 6 hours. So you're thinking about 6 hours a day times however many days, however many weeks in advance. That's tons of different model data. It can swing, one can show 20 inches of snow and the next run it could show nothing. So these models are kind of all over the place. So we look for pattern recognition and consistency. Then once we get closer to 5 to 7 days, we're looking for trends upward and downward. Is it looking more or less likely that we could see a wintry mix? We're officially, as of this morning, so it's Saturday morning at about day 6. So we're kind of smack dab in the middle of this. At this point in time, Saturday, December 17th at 10:41 a.m., I think we are trending slightly better. I wouldn't say substantially better, but slightly better. And there's a bunch of reasons why that we're going to work through in this live stream, but also some reasons why we may not be. We're going to get to that, of course, as we look ahead. So right now we're kind of in that period where we're trying to trend upward or downward. What you won't see from the WCNC weather team is any kind of specific maps and totals and things like that until we're 1 to 3 days out. There's a few reasons why. One of them is that they're not accurate, right? There's still a lot of question marks to be worked out, and we're not going to just throw a map out there and let our viewers be misinformed. That's just something that we're not going to do. So kind of question number one, Thursday night and into Friday. As you look at the model snowfall potential, the European is showing this. You can kind of see how there's some snowfall up in the mountains, but nothing really elsewhere. The European is keeping almost everything with the latest runs, still up toward the mountains especially. Now, there are some runs of their ensemble models, which are the ensemble models are the ones that are usually more accurate that we talk about, where it takes the same model and it changes 52 different weather parameters and tries to see if it can bring snow. Of those, only a handful are showing something. The European has been very consistent for the most part with a really unlikely snow event here Thursday into Friday in the Carolinas, but it has a pretty good idea, right, that they think that it will snow up toward the mountains. But I'm talking about the Charlotte area, whereas the GFS is much different. The GFS, I will say, thankfully has backed off a little bit. It a lot of times shows those really, really crazy snowfall totals, especially this time of year. But then as it gets closer to the event, it does a better job at kind of seeing like, a better overall trend with what's going to happen. So the GFS still has a pretty consistent look here that we could see something for the Charlotte area. And what I like to see with this potential is that their ensembles are very similar. So it has a few areas in the Charlotte area, but again, most toward the mountains and foothills. So what I like to see is that they're very, very consistent with each other. So the GFS and their ensemble members. What I don't like to see is how different these two still are. Again, we're still 6 days out, but that's something that we're watching. So of course, we're also watching what kind of event this is. So Thursday night and into Friday, it will have already been raining across the metro for a lot of spots. And so if it were to get a wintry mix, it would be mostly Thursday night into Friday morning. Cold air chasing events. So what that means is when it's already raining and you kind of get that cold air moving in. Whereas sometimes you have an event, right, where it's cold and then we get the moisture. This will be moisture first, then the cold. So it's called a cold air chasing event. A lot of times these are really, really low confidence. What I think that we need to be prepared for regardless is if it rains Thursday, even if the rain is over by Friday when it gets cold enough and we don't get any wintry precipitation in the Charlotte area, there is the potential for black ice. So this would be the morning of the 23rd. So I want everyone to, again, keep that kind of in the back of their mind. And again, I know the stream is long. I do apologize, but we just kind of have to work our way through every single day. So you can probably kind of, digress from what I've been talking about is that we're kind of looking at a few different differences in the models, the fact that they're not in very good agreement, that's never a good thing, but also just the fact that we kind of have some things working against us, right? So we have the cold air locked in place. We're not 100% sure yet, will the moisture, be cold enough to really see anything? So we still have a little bit of a discrepancy. Well, we also have to watch, and this will be closer to the event itself, because it is really, really hard to tell if we're going to have any kind of an effect from the warm nose a week in advance. It's just almost impossible. But we'll be watching the warm nose. You may have heard this if you've been in the Charlotte area for a long time. If not, I'll kind of give you just, a little overview. So the warm nose is essentially cold air in the upper levels of the atmosphere. You need it to stay cold all the way down until it reaches the ground to see snow. Simple explanation, right? What happens with a warm nose is that it's colder here, high up in the atmosphere, and it's colder here. But that middle tier, it's briefly above freezing. So what happens is the snow melts and then refreezes. If that warm nose is higher in the atmosphere, you usually get sleet because the moisture has enough time to refreeze. That's when you get those sleet, those bouncy ice pellets. If the warm area is closer to the ground and you get that melting and then a quick refreeze, oftentimes it can happen as it's getting closer to the ground and can cause freezing rain. Freezing rain and black ice is more dangerous than sleet, but essentially the warm nose is there some kind of warm air at any levels of the atmosphere that could prevent this from staying cold all the way toward the ground? That's essentially a quick little overview of that. So To kind of summarize things, what my forecast problems are, but what I'm intrigued by. So I'm Problem is, of course, the model disagreement. The European has less snow. It's a slower system. It keeps the low further north, and it doesn't develop a second coastal low that the GFS has been hinting at, which the GFS coastal low would allow for a little bit more moisture, which is why I think that it's picking up on more of a potential for some snow. The GFS, of course, has more snow. It's a faster system. It's a little bit further south, and it has that coastal low. So having this much disagreement 6 days out is not abnormal, but it's one of the disagreement problems I have. Again, I mentioned this earlier. I am intrigued by the GFS and its ensemble members, that they're very similar. Problem is that they're the outlier. Almost every single other model, the European and others that we don't often talk about as much, are not as confident. Another thing that I think is interesting, and going to plot this on, is that we have GFS and Euro ensembles. So earlier this week, if you were watching Brad's weather vlog, he showed you guys a really good model that we use from Pivotal Weather that talks about chances of seeing 1 inch or more of snow on the ground. And the GFS was showing 20%. That is up. It's actually up to 39% right now. So it's increased. But the problem is that the European ensemble, so same thing, you take a model, right? You plot it, change 52 different things and you rerun them, only has a 6%. Again, that's a pretty substantial difference, almost 40% versus 6%. Very substantial change. So I don't love that there's that much disagreement. Um, Another thing that's intriguing is if you've been watching our newscast, we've been mentioning that there's kind of a second chance to see a little bit of a wintry mix, which would be Sunday night, so the 25th night, so Christmas Day evening, and into Monday morning. Those percentages are kind of flip flopped. The European is a little bit more confident that we could see something on the ground, which were versus the GFS saying no, no, no. So it's kind of an interesting little plot twist, right? That they're in disagreement on the first one and then kind of flip flopped on the second one. Now, if the GFS were to be perfect, come to complete fruition, it would likely be what we call a Miller A nor'easter setup, where you have the storm system track that's kind of just south of the Carolinas, and it produces rain and sometimes severe weather for the deep south, including southern Georgia and into Florida. And if it's close enough to the coast, but not too close where we're in the rain sector, we can get a wintry mix and some freezing rain. And it's a pretty similar setup to what we had last year when we were talking about that first storm that ended up being an ice storm, because we just were in the low was closer to the Carolina coast. So we were in kind of that yellow area of pink that you can kind of see on our map. So again, there's a lot of stuff that still needs to be worked out. At this point, what I want folks to know is we have really 2 rounds that we're tracking here over the next week. The first is Thursday into Thursday night, and then Friday morning. Second, again, Sunday night and into Monday. And that's not this coming Sunday, that we're talking over a week from now. So there's a lot that can change, a lot that needs to be worked out. But I think at least officially with Brad's winter weather forecast rules for this first event, Thursday and into Friday, I would say that we are slightly higher than we were before. Now let's actually talk Christmas forecast trends. Temperatures have been pretty steady. Lows in the upper teens, lower 20s, highs only in the 30s. Rainfall on Christmas itself looks still unlikely. And I mentioned this, of course, a second ago. With those trends a little bit lower for snow on the ground, I'm keeping things at 5 to 10% to at least have some kind of snow on the ground. What's interesting is that our normal chance of seeing some kind of snow on Christmas is about 1.4%. So we're at least higher than the average. So I know that was a lot. We're going to talk more about it tomorrow. We'll kind of look at what's changed and what stayed the same. But at least in that 7-day forecast, of course, sponsored by the amazing Guy Roofing. Today, partly sunny. We're seeing clouds now. Sunshine this afternoon, lower 50s. Tomorrow morning will be colder in the upper 20s. Highs only reaching the mid 40s. Panthers back at home against the Steelers. Of course, the first day of Hanukkah, Sunday night. And of course, we do stay colder for pretty much every day through Thursday. Thursday, you see that rain popping up here on our 7-day forecast. That'll be kind of the first chance that we're watching for a little bit of a wintry mix. So just make sure everybody is staying weather aware. They know that this is at least a chance. They know we're watching it because I mentioned this a second ago. Regardless of what happens, we could have the potential for some black ice on Friday morning. It'll be the 23rd. Hopefully, folks are already at their destination by that point, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're like myself, a lot of people, who work in news, first responders, things like that, who oftentimes, right, don't aren't at the destination by the 23rd. So I just want everyone to stay safe and, of course, stay weather aware. We will continue to update you throughout the week. Um, and I'm sure we'll have another update throughout the day too. And you can ask any questions you'd like here. I'll open up the window of opportunity, I guess, to ask any questions, at least for a few minutes. And just reminding everybody to stay weather aware and stay safe out there. If you have anything that you see later on, maybe you're not watching this live and you're watching it later. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email um, myself, Brad, KJ, Chris, Larry, messages on social media. We will all respond to you as soon as we can. Um, but at least right now we are watching again a small. Brian asking, so thinking snow. I don't know if he's saying that as a question or a statement. Um, Brian, I think that we are still on the. We're still increasing higher that we could see at least a chance for some wintry mix. Right now, I mean, snow is a possibility, but it's definitely not a guarantee. But it's an intriguing forecast. And of course, interesting that this year we're talking the chance, for a wintry mix a few days before Christmas, whereas last year we had highs 20 degrees warmer than normal, and this year it'll be 20 degrees colder. Because that's the thing too. Almost never are talking about this because of where our normal high is this time of year into the mid 50s. In fact, in 144 years, almost 150 years of keeping records here in Charlotte, uh, it's only officially had 1 inch or more of snow on the ground 2 times, but it's actually only snowed 4 times. So that's less than 2%. So just interesting. Statistics would tell you it's very unlikely, but right now we're at least higher than the average. But when the average is 2%, it's not that much higher. Not getting a lot of other questions, so we're kind of going to wrap up the stream. Thank you so much for anybody who kind of stayed with me for the full 25 minutes. Wow, that went fast. Again, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to ask. And of course, we'll be back on Wake Up Charlotte Weekend tomorrow, starting at 6 a.m. We'll be on from 8 and then again from 9 to 10. I hope everybody has a safe, happy, and healthy weekend. And we'll keep you updated whether or not we can see wintry precipitation coming up here this week. Have a great day.